1 to 6 players doing things around town and in Frontierlands in order to strike it rich. Final Frontier Games provided this in exchange for an honest review. Every player takes a player board and a colored set of bits and cards. Player wagons go in the Coloma spot on the Frontier map in the top left, and scoring markers start at 0 on the score track. Fill the gold supply depending on player count. Put out outlaws based on the year track in the bottom left. In the bottom right, below the river tiles, randomly set out 6 bridges. The amount depends on player count. Next, randomly set out 4 face-out barrels at the top. The rest are in a face-down stack next to it. Finally, the center rondel starts with the Barker covering Site 5 and the Bust covering Site 4. Every player starts with a Pioneer, Dial, and 2 dudes, 1 tent. Place these on your lodge. Take $2, 1 gold nugget, and a horse. Place it below your lodge. Shuffle your town building cards, draw 6, and choose 4. When you discard, you may choose to return the cards to the top or bottom of your deck. Before I explain how the game works, look at the top of the board. The rivers and bridges I mentioned earlier will go on top of your board. We'll take a closer look at these components later. First, I'll explain the dial. Everyone will simultaneously choose a site, 1 through 5, based on what action they want to perform. You do this secretly, although table talk is allowed. You can flat out say where you're going, or lie. Coloma is 3 years, 5 rounds, and 7 steps within a round, plus 2 phases after that. Sound complicated? It's actually not. Step 1 is rotating the Barker and Bust, meaning they now cover sites 1 and 5. Trigger the event. At site 1, everyone gets 2 dudes. We'll take a closer look at the sites soon. Everyone reveals what site they chose and moves their Pioneer there. The site with the most Pioneers goes Bust. Rotate the Bust, not the Barker, to cover the rondel's boom location. Now only the common action is available to those players. Anyhow, everyone not in a Bust site can resolve their turns simultaneously. Players at a Bust site should resolve in player order. Once all sites have been resolved, take back your Pioneers and begin the next round. Rotate the Barker and Bust and start a new round. The Barker's common action allows you to buy tents for bucks or buy horses with gold nuggets. The boom action allows you to take a barrel either face down or face up. If you take a face up barrel, add the shown number of outlaws, then refill the space. Site 1 is the workday. The event is gain 2 dudes, which I mentioned earlier. The common action activates the shovel ability on your player board. The boom action activates the wheelbarrow ability. Once you build buildings, you'll notice that some will also have shovel and wheelbarrow abilities. In other words, Site 1 gets more powerful throughout the game. Site 2 is survey a river or build a bridge. The event is gain a gold nugget. The common action activates the hammer and the boom action activates the saw. You must gain a river before you build a bridge. Place the river tile in any spot atop your player board. Once you build a bridge, it goes over a river. It costs a lot to get rivers and bridges. 2 to 3 dudes, and a whole pile of bucks and or gold. But they give you victory points and or bonus actions. Let's look at the bridges now. After placing a river, you gain the bonus on your player board. Bridges are endgame scoring bonuses based on things you accomplished, such as triggering the most barrels or having the most dudes die. Because you randomly selected these at the start, this part of Coloma will feel different each time you play. Site 3 is build a town building. The event is draw 2 cards. The common action activates the hammer, and the boom action activates the saw. Pay the cost on your town building card, then place it next to your board. Let's look at some buildings. The costs are in the top left, and endgame victory points are in the top right. The site number is on the left. From now on, whenever you visit a site, you also trigger the common, boom, and or bust ability of all buildings at that site. Site 4 is Move Your Wagon. The event is gained $2. The common and boom actions are the same here. The number of spots your wagon can move is up to the number of horses you have on your player board. Let's look at the Frontier map. Look at all those benefits. There are 3 types of spots. Horseshoes are worthless. Settlements give you a small benefit. Dudes, gold, and so on. Boomtowns give an even bigger benefit. But there's a catch. You gain the first one just by passing by. If you stop on a boomtown, you may choose the first benefit or the second. There's something else special about the Frontier map, but let's get back to the sites. Site 5 is Settle the Frontier and Defend Coloma. The event is spend 1 gold to gain 3 victory points. The common action activates the place abilities. First, you may place any number of tents on the Frontier map. You can place 1 tent in the 5 Frontier lands, depending on which boomtown you're in. At the end of the game, you'll score victory points depending on how many tents you placed. Second, you may also place tents at a site's event box. You know how I've been talking about the event at each site? I explained that all players receive the event bonus at the start of the round. Well, if you placed a tent at a site, you get double the event bonus. The last thing you can do is defend Coloma. Let's look at the shootout. When placing dudes at the shootout, you must fill an entire section. Notice how there are 5 sections with 1 through 5 spots. Why sacrifice dudes just to protect the town? After the 5th round, the shootout begins. If there were more dudes than outlaws, congratulations, you defended Coloma. Outlaws are returned to the box, and dudes are placed back in the supply. That's right, you lost those dudes. So again, why sacrifice them? Well, see the left side of the year card? The player who sent the most dudes to defend Coloma gets the first reward, and so on. Players who sent no dudes to the shootout lose a dude, either from their lodge area or the supply. This dude goes on a player's board's gravesite. Dead dudes are worth negative points at the end of the game. See the right side of the year card? That's what happens if the number of outlaws was greater or equal to the number of dudes. That's the game. Again, it sounds much more complicated than it actually is. I didn't talk about the variants such as player powers, unique player boards, and the hotels, but these just add small tweaks to the main game. Choose a site and activate the actions there. Don't forget about building, exploring, and defending. That's Coloma. Coloma's central board is quite large. Your player areas grow, and there are piles of bits that need to be kept nearby. Save this for dining tables. Your learning game will probably be around 2 hours. More with the full player count. Once you know what you're doing, 3 to 4 player games can be played in under 90 minutes. Analysis paralysis means you freeze when you need to make decisions. There are tons of AP moments in this game, which will slow things down a lot. I'll talk about this again in my likes and dislikes. There's next to no reading, and math is simple addition and multiplication during endgame scoring, and parents can help with that. There are so many simples though. Thankfully, the player and rulebook references cover these. While I've said the gameplay is simple, that doesn't mean it's easy. You only have 5 rounds per year and 15 rounds in a game. You won't be able to do everything you want, plus you'll be blocked from the boom action many times throughout the game. Every choice and decision depends on your situation, your opponent's needs, game state, and more. I'd say the youngest players should be experienced 10-year-old gamers. In our third game of Coloma, my dad wanted to see how he'd do without exploring the frontier or defending Coloma. Of course, we didn't know this during the game, but I had an idea because one bridge bonus was for having dead dudes. He also took the Barker multiple times, grabbing barrels and using their abilities on top of visiting sites. Yep, he also targeted the bridge that rewarded spent barrels. He was able to blow through his deck, grabbing yet another bridge that rewarded having a large hand. Afterwards, during our Q&A, he said he only decided to do this because of those bridges, which is something I'll talk about in my likes and dislikes. Why am I talking about that so much here instead of my game? Well, he tried really hard to be competitive, and it worked. He finished 1 point ahead of Mom. I feel a bit bad for him because despite all this, I crushed him. Coloma's Rondel is so clever. There's how the cards work with the sights, the boom and bust mechanism, the signpost, and the Barker. It's simple, but works incredibly well. Speaking of simple things that work well, look at the barrels. You know what some will do, but those ones had outlaws. Maybe you should push your luck on an unknown one, but what if it doesn't help? That's every decision and choice in Coloma. Should I or shouldn't I? Even before adding the variant modules, you have a bit of variety with how the barrels and bridges come out. The barrels just change a tiny amount of in-game action, but as I explained in Storytime, the bridges can inform your entire strategy. There are multiple ways to win, or at least be competitive. You can explore the frontier lands, or dominate the shootout, or build buildings, or survey rivers and build bridges, or a combination. The graphic design is really good. Everything is separated, outlined, or colored in a way to stand out quickly. This is one of the reasons why your second and third place will be much quicker than your first. As soon as you learn how to read the cards and board, it's a snap. One problem, spending things is red and gaining things is green. This makes sense. Why would you gain dudes when building a bridge? Still, colorblind people might have an issue. The only differences with unique player boards are the bonuses gained when you survey a river. It's subtle, but I like it because it also informs your game strategy. There are variable player powers, but even though I normally like when games have this, I don't think they're all equal. I'm looking at you, Prospector. The rulebook does give combo suggestions of boards and player powers, which is a smart idea. Speaking of the rulebook, it's thick, but breaks everything down, has tons of examples, tips, and is quite good. Hotels are another variant, and I think they're a good way to get points if you can explore the frontier lands or place dudes at shootouts. I always like having choices and options in games. Okay, let's talk about analysis paralysis again. Honestly, I'd skip this if even one person in your group is AP Pro. There are so many simultaneous parts to the game that things really drag if you're waiting on one person, let alone more than one. Coloma takes a handful of ideas and makes them work in clever and fun ways. If you're familiar with Village, this blows that away. If you're familiar with Trajan, I think this is a lighter version of that, while still being a brain burner where you're constantly thinking, no, I just need more time. I recommend it. With that said, it's good with 3, but I think it'd be best with 4 or more players. The placement and blocking is less likely to keep hurting the same player, and instead has more of a chance to affect everyone.